at that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, "Who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he put a child among them and said, "Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like this child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven." Good evening. Welcome to Going to Ground. Today the church remembers a wonderful woman called Eglantine Jebb. It's one of the most interesting things about the Church of England's calendar of readings and commemorations, that every day or two you've got a new person to learn about from history, an amazing life which is an example and an inspiration to us. And Eglantine Jebb was certainly that. And as some of you will know, she was the founder of Save the Children, one of the greatest of the charities of the modern era. And Save the Children was founded 101 years ago in the wake of the First World War, around the time of the flu epidemic and mass poverty and migration in the wake of the war. And this was a passionate personal response that Eglantine felt that something had to be done to save children around the world. It was a revolutionary outreach beyond our own borders to have compassion on children who were suffering. Eglantine died on this day in 1928 and wasn't an old woman by any means when she died, but her life was a great firework. Her nickname was White Heat, apparently. How do you get a nickname like White Heat? Well, by being an absolute dynamo. Somebody who just left others standing with her industry and her passion, a determination to make a change. She was somebody who would hear a passage of scripture like the one I began with and just automatically assume that required action of her. Not like me, just sitting back and reflecting on it. What does this mean? She would just say, okay, then we need to help children. And then she did it. And she cajoled and bothered and inspired, and like a terrier wouldn't let go, and began that great good virus of charity, where people got the idea and it crackled like spark through dry grass. It just, people got the zest for it, the zeal for it. The importance of seeing the world like children is a really significant theme in the New Testament and the teachings of Jesus. It might mean all sorts of things, of course. It might mean not losing our sense of wonder. And we read it, we hear those verses with very obviously 21st century ears, when children have a different status in our culture, not least due to the endeavour of charities like Save the Children. But in Jesus' day, of course, children were really the least in society, having neither status nor rights of their own. And so to become childlike would be to become weak, without any status, and utterly dependent on the charity of others. So Jesus' example of the child as the one who enters the kingdom of heaven would have been shocking, laughable actually. And while our culture is of course very different, the place of children is still staggeringly vulnerable. Children receive whatever life gives or denies them. They live entirely by grace, we would say. They can't win life. They can't get what they need for themselves, and so they are utterly dependent. And Jesus is encouraging us to recognize too our utter dependence on God, our childlike need, that we aren't self-sufficient, and let this realization of our own vulnerability impel us, move us to be charitable. It's easy to forget that a nation's values don't emerge by accident, but through this process of seeing the world differently and being moved to action. The great charitable impulse that was the engine of so much social change in our country came in large part from the Christian vision of women and men like Eglantine Jebb, who heard the teaching of Christ and decided to live differently. The late Clive James wrote that a society is civilized to the extent that it understands human frailty. And Eglantine Jebb, founder of Save the Children, understood that frailty and devoted her life to helping others see the world from a child's perspective. So may her example inspire us to do likewise. God bless you as you go to ground.